Hello and welcome to English Through Experience. I'm ETETutor. This is an unseen poetry revision video. It'll be useful for all exam boards, but at the beginning I'm going to just talk about Eduqas. So skip forward a little bit if you just need the detailed analysis of Lucid Dreams by Juice Wrld. Okay, so for Eduqas students, the unseen poetry comes in paper 2 and in section C. So your exam paper is going to look something like this. Okay, so this is the summary of assessment, and we've got component 1 and component 2. Yeah, so it's paper 1, paper 2. So paper 1 is actually worth 40% of your whole mark, and paper 2 is worth 60% of your whole mark, yeah? And section C that we're looking at here, unseen poetry from the 20th to the 21st century, is also worth 20%. So, you know, you probably spend a lot of time, say, revising A Christmas Carol or An Inspector Calls, but it's really worthwhile to stop and do some unseen poetry practice as well. The poetry question looks something like this. So you can see you have your first part, part A, over here, and it's worth that 15 marks, and you're focusing on just a single poem. And then in part B, you are focusing on comparing the poem you've just analysed with this new one. You've got the same prompts, so you're doing exactly the same thing in both tasks, so that makes it nice and easy. Lots of people ask about mark schemes. This is what you need for trying to mark your own work, so you can find this in any mark scheme. You just need to look for section C, unseen poetry, and there's one for each of the two tasks, because obviously in the second one you are comparing. And finally, what you need to know before we get going is the assessment objectives that you're being assessed on in these tasks, and that's AO1 and AO2, and they're both weighted equally. So when the examiners, like me, are having a look, what we're doing is synthesizing both columns here, so your AO1 column and your AO2 column, to arrive at a mark for you. Okay. Now, this is the chance to actually put some of this into practice and have a go at looking at an example text. So what I've done is created this template here. So you could do something similar to this and just keep sticking in different poems, or as you can see this time I've done a song lyric, I've done song lyrics, and I have picked a very straightforward theme that I can use to compare this poem to another poem of my choice later on in another video. So the reason I've picked this particular song is because one of my students was grumbling, saying they pick stuff for the exams that's so hard it's impossible to try and analyse it. And I said, well, you can analyse pretty much anything if you know your terminology and you know what the exam is looking for. And they were just scoffing at that, arguing, no you can't, no you can't. I said, yeah, I'll do anything. So here we go, that's how we've arrived at this particular one. Techniques are the same for you, whatever comes up in the exam. So the first place to start with analysis is just having a quick look at the name of the poem and what expectations that sets up for us. So Lucid Dreams, pretty vague. We're thinking maybe it's perhaps positive, because dreams tend to be associated with more positive things. If it was something bad, we might expect to see lucid nightmares. So it sets us up potentially for something positive. Now that, because we're talking about where something comes within the poem, that can be considered as a structural comment. Loads of people are really concerned as to whether their points are to do with structure or if they're to do with language. Now some points are hard because it's a bit of both, but we'll try and go through that difference as we go. So straight away, if we're talking about structure, we know that we are hitting what we need to in terms of the exam, because the examiner needs to know that you have some understanding of how the poem's been organised. So here we're thinking perhaps positive. And then we've got the artist, the writer here. And then we come to the next stage of our analysis. Now, and here's what I made earlier. I kept knocking the tripod trying to make notes at the same time, so this is the best I can do. Right, so once you've analysed the title of the poem, next thing you want to do is just quickly count up the stanzas. It's unlikely you'll see something this long in the exam, but it does just help you avoid making that particular mistake. Right, as you know, poems are made up with these stanzas and these lines. The best way to approach it from this point onwards is to work your way through the text, highlighting as you go. I like colour coding. Even if at first with your first scan it's just a pencil and you're underlining, you can go back and do this and it will help you keep on track and make sure you're talking about the themes, structure, ideas and the use of words. So what I've done is just quickly put a bit of a colour code here. It's not perfect. I did this at I think 6 o'clock this morning, so hopefully I can remember what I was thinking at the time. First line, we have got no, no, no. So the title sets us up possibly to think it's something positive, and now we are put instantly on edge. It's a very negative opening to the poem. Obviously it uses repetition, so it's emphasising how strongly the writer feels about whatever's going to come next. Next thing that we can notice very quickly just by scanning through is the repeated use of these personal pronouns I and you. It shows us that it's going to be very personal and emotional. It's their own particular story. And this you, this person here, is being directly addressed at certain points. At the beginning it's more reflection, but then we can see that they're kind of talking to this person within the poem. That's something that you can look out for. So we've got our personal pronouns, and then something that jumps out straight away is that in the first line is the shadows. So this dark imagery, it's a dramatic opening. So again, a structural point if you're talking about the opening or the beginning of the poem. I still see your shadows in my room. Okay, so this is dark imagery. It's interesting actually to think about the room. Well, we associate my room as in my bedroom, so there's the link there back to the idea of dreams. Next thing we get here is it's to the point where I love and I hate you. Theme. This is really good for talking about themes because it's an age-old problem. It's something you hear all the time. I know I've had friends who have said similar sort of things. So this idea possibly of young love or unrequited love is an age-old problem. People are always listening to their hearts instead of their heads. So you could combine those two quotes together to suggest that yes, it is a poem about love and relationships and the typical kind of feelings that many, many people experience. Right. We've got here this CC, so hopefully you can remember what that stands for. Sorry, what method it is. It's alliteration, so that repetition of the C sound in this example emphasises the harshness of the feelings that the writer has. I cannot change you, so I must replace you. Okay, so you could perhaps pick up on that one. And then here we've got this O in parenthesis, in brackets. So this is an interesting one. It appears twice, so we can see we've got repetition again. It's an interjection, so in terms of what part of speech it is, it's like the little bits that people add in, often more like sound effects. So yay, yippee, oh, as we have here. It really emphasises the despair. Structurally, it's becoming here at the end of the line and here. So again, it's just a kind of reflection and afterthought, letting out all of that emotion. It's a very emotional poem, as we can see. Now we come on to a slightly different point here. So we can see that it's not grammatically correct. There's little missing words throughout the poem. So rather than I can't take back the love that I gave you, it's just can't take back the love that I gave you. It makes it a lot more conversational. It makes it feel more like they're talking directly to us. And I think that's what often poets want to do. They want us to make us feel exactly how they want us to. So by creating this conversational tone, it adds realism and builds that relationship. Yeah? Okay, so we can see we come on to a new stanza now, 4-line stanza. And we can see that there's a little bit of a shift at this point. We've had the dark imagery of the shadows, but now we're actually getting this imagery of death. So we've got the mention of grave, obviously the word dead, which for some reason I didn't highlight. There we go. And we also get introduced to a new theme here, which I would describe perhaps as depression. There's this use of this line, I take prescriptions to make me feel A-OK. That A-OK is particularly interesting because it's quite a good example of sarcasm. When people say A-OK, very often they mean, yeah, I'm not really okay. And I think that is what's going on here. We can see there's imagery of being trapped. We've got this, the grave obviously, and we've got the idea that when you're having a lucid dream, you're awake in your dream, but you can't actually do anything. So again, you're trapped, you're frozen, perhaps frozen in time because of this love. And then the next part we can see in the next stanza, we go from the kind of death imagery, there's a shift in focus to the sort of semantic field of love and relationship. So dreams, which can be happy, bed, wedding ring, but it's undercut at the end by this direct reference to death for the first time. So if you handle that part well, you will be talking about language and structure. Okay, just leave that one there because we can see the colour code then as well. Right, there's some nice stuff going on here as well. We can see that he uses some natural imagery here and that he doesn't want this relationship to end. And even if you could just watch it blow in the wind, it would be better than nothing. This nature imagery is juxtaposed, so it's kind of smashed together two different things with this idea of being plastic and fake. So again, you could use that structurally as well as using the particular language points. Didn't mention it, but we've got some, didn't note it down, but we've got some phonetic spelling here, so outer. So words spelt how people say them rather than being correctly spelt. We can see we've got the use of an expletive here. Did this shit in the past. And this word's only used twice within the poem. And we could possibly argue that this sets the writer aside from other writers within this particular genre, because one of the typical conventions is that there are often expletives. It doesn't mean there always is, it's just typical of the genre. And perhaps that's something that we would say about this writer, is that they're a more sensitive soul. Yeah? Because perhaps argue that resentment here is a bit of a theme as well. It's definitely one of the ideas that he's playing with. We've got this repetition now in this stanza 5. Break, ache, break, ache, break, ache, break, ache. So we can definitely see that it's like torture what he's been going through, and that use of repetition emphasises this. We come in here with this parenthesis again. Who knew evil girls have the prettiest face? Again, not grammatically correct. It would be faces, but that's not what this poem's about. It's not about being a poem. This is not what these lyrics are about. It's not about being grammatically correct. It's about being real and bringing that realism across. And we can see that the parenthesis sort of reflects a kind of reflection. It's almost like a kind of inner monologue that he's sharing his thoughts with us. In here we can see that we've got an identical stanza to stanza 2, except for this but. So it's on this part where he's saying, you found another one, but I am the better one. At first, oh, okay, ignore me because I'm wrong. There is but in this second stanza. For some reason, this morning at 6 o'clock, I didn't see that. So let's just imagine for a second that it wasn't there, and what you could argue is what I've done here, that it suggests a shift in perspective and that he's finally decided he is the better one. Don't know what was going on inside my mind. And that makes me think of something that students have queried in terms of feedback. You might see a comment, something like not valid, and that just means like it's not true. So if I'd written that in my essay, the examiner's going to put not valid, and I'm going to struggle to get marks for what I've written there. Bad me. Right, let's go over and just finish off. We've talked about this word shit already. Did this shit in the past, but I want it to last. So it's a reference to his own behaviour, similar to where he says he's not okay, he's a-okay. So it's building up this idea that this relationship is having an impact upon his mental health and causing some kind of depression possibly. Here we've got this phrase tangled up. So that word tangled again makes us think of being trapped. We're in a situation we can't get out of, similar to being inside a grave and having the lucid dreams where he can't move. So we could argue that he's trapped because of his love for her. Finally, we come back to similar sentiments that we've heard throughout the poem about the unrequited love that he feels and that he's stressing that he won't let her forget him. We're left in a kind of limbo in a similar way that the writer has been left in this situation, this limbo of wanting to be back together with her, also kind of not wanting to, kind of wanting to move on. So there's a lot of emotions involved, leaving us in the same limbo of the writer. So again, he's manipulating our thoughts and our feelings, making us feel a certain way. Right, just to kind of wrap up, in terms of structure then, we'd be saying that there's a regular rhyme scheme. You know, if you do your counting, your A, B, and so on, you can see there's nothing there. We can see that there's a relationship all the way through between what's said and what comes next. So this kind of foreshadowing of positiveness and then it being undercut. And we can see that the darkness grows throughout the poem, so that's another way of bringing structure in. In terms of themes, we might say unrequited love, young love, reflection, entrapment, depression. So those things would all come throughout your response, along with, you know, your subject terminology, maybe mentioning the poet's voice, talking about the symbolism, the wedding ring, say what does that represent. You would be perhaps mentioning the monologue like we said earlier. So there's lots of terminology you'll use alongside stuff like repetition, ellipsis, expletives and so on. You can see here that where I put young love, I also just put contextual. Now, if I knew nothing about the poem, there's not an awful lot, sorry, nothing about the writer, there's not an awful lot here to justify me saying that it's young love. Hopefully you can see that. But because I did know how old he was, I was able to make that connection. The other thing that I'm sure if you do know what we'd think of as the kind of backstory of the writer, you will know that unfortunately he has passed away. So it is extremely ironic that within this poem he's expressing sentiments such as "I'm better off dead," when we know that he is no longer with us. So hopefully that has helped and helped you see that although we might not stop and think about it as we're listening to music, there's so much going on. And whoever the writer is, they're always using different devices in order to make us think and feel a certain way. So hopefully you can see those connections. Everything that we've been talked about, everything we've talked about is here in these bullet points. Alright then, thank you very much for watching. If you aren't sure about your subject terminology, I've made a few different videos about that, so they might be worth checking out. If you have any song lyrics that you'd like me to have a go at, please just put your suggestions in the comment section. And if I fancy it, I'll give it a try. I do think these are quite fun to do, and I do think, like I said at the beginning, that this unseen poetry is a good area of the exam to pick up marks, so it's worth spending a little bit of time preparing for it. Alright then, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.